further ado, here we go. So welcome. It is March 25th, and we are sharing some really exciting policy updates and action items. So let's start big on the macro level, on the federal level. So earlier this month, we got some news that the fiscal year 22 omnibus budget finally passed, or at least moved to the next step that looks like we're in great shape. And the big sort of headline for all of us is that the budget will include 180 million each for the NEA and the NEH. And you can see that this is obviously a pretty significant increase from last year's budget. And it also represents the highest amount for both of the agencies since 1992, when it was about, I think it was about 177 million. So this is good news. It is not certainly what President Biden had recommended. He had recommended about around 200 million, but it is still good news. And as we know, those dollars portions of that directly go to our state arts agency, the Mass Cultural Council. It also goes directly to our humanities agencies, which is Mass Humanities. Then there are obviously the federal grant programs that folks can apply for. So this is good. This is, that means that there'll be a little bit of an increase in both of our state allocations. Okay. The other thing that I want to highlight here, and sorry for the very crowded slide here, is that as we talked about a while ago, the fiscal year 22 federal budget also was the return of earmarks, right? And they are not called earmarks, right? They're called congressional directed spending. Or congressional directed funds. And there were a number of arts and cultural entities that received a congressional directed funding in this fiscal year 22 budget. That's good news, right? I've listed the ones. I went through sort of all of the various subcommittee appropriations and tried to pull out as many as I could find. Apologies if I've missed a few, but I want to just show some patterns here, right? You can see that there are two in particular, the Creative Hub Community Arts Center and then the Northampton Community Arts Trust. These are both for capital projects for arts spaces and creative spaces. They were both requested and championed by Representative McGovern. In fact, on the House side, he was the one who sort of submitted it and had sort of the most luck or not the most success, I should say, in terms of getting earmarks for arts and culture. So I think this is a champion moment, a hero moment that if you are in Representative McGovern's district, dropping a note to say we are so glad to have you as a leader and a champion is a good thing. You can also see that Senators Markey and Warren were requested a number of earmarks here. And then the other thing is like, we can do more. So let's talk about that, because there are going to be earmarks in the fiscal year 23 budget. You should consider requesting or engaging with your member of Congress and our senators around funding, right? The requests are actually due next month. The way that it looks, the timeline, at least for the House, is that they're going to open it up at the beginning of the month for members to start making requests and submitting them to the appropriate subcommittee, and then they have to be done by the end of April. So you can't wait on this. The other thing is that House members are allowed to submit 15 congressionally directed funding requests across all the subcommittees. So the other thing I would say is like, there needs to be some rigor behind the requests that you're making. Again, last year, they were really looking for shovel-ready projects or projects that it wasn't sort of about scoping something out. It was like, look, we already have this in the pipeline. This is an easy yes. I would imagine that's going to continue this year. Senator Markey's office has already set up a portal for you, so you can put that request in. Where the Senator Warren and other members of Congress have yet to sort of put something on their website. They will be required to actually, every member of Congress is required to post that information. So we should see that soon, but that shouldn't mean that you wait. So you should reach out to your member of Congress's offices and just say, hey, I just want to know what the process is. I'd love to have a conversation. We've got this in the pipeline, right? The other thing to note is, if this is something that's really interesting, feel free to just drop me a line and we can talk more in depth about this. I also have I have copies of what at least what Senator Markey's application process or application looks like, and I'm happy to share that out too. So if this is like something you want to follow up on, let's do it. Okay, next up, just a quick, just here's where we are in the process, right, for the state budget. We're now moving to the state level. So on March 1st, the Mass Cultural Council testified in front of the Ways and Means Committee and requested $27.4 million. The reason, and we talked about this before, the reason it's $27.4 million is that is the high water mark that the agency received in all of history, in all of the agency's history. And that was in 1988. So this would be approximately about a $6 million increase from last year's allocation. And we are going to continue to work on that. This is a good thing, right? We know there's more need in the sector. We knew before the pandemic that the arts and cultural sector in Massachusetts needed more public investment, and that hasn't changed in the last 3 years, right? In April, House Ways and Means will start their part of the process. We can expect most likely that right before April vacation, the House Ways and Means Committee will release their budget. And then members of the House will have an opportunity to file their amendment. So we'll keep you in contact about what is happening in terms of what the recommendation is and what sort of advocacy we might all want to engage on. Okay, so this is the big exciting news that came out of the Baker-Polito administration earlier this week. They launched this program called Hire Now. And this is a hiring and grant and training employer grant program, right? To be eligible, you can be a for-profit or a nonprofit employer. You have to be based in Massachusetts. It is only for new employees. So if you hired someone last month, I'm sorry, it doesn't count. But you can receive, if you apply, $4,000 for each eligible employee that's hired, and with a limit of $400,000, right? And here in the chat, you're going to see links to a lot more information, but basically they gave these examples of how you could apply those funds, right? So you could use it for additional, like if you want to pay to bring that employee on for a straight up training program before they're starting to get to work, so that they can do shadowing work with maybe with another employee. You can do that. You can hire external training providers, right, to provide more professional development. You can actually do sign-on bonuses or retention bonuses, right? So if you're finding yourself in a space where you're having difficulty, you've got a job that's been listed for a while, and you want to incentivize either getting somebody on quickly or getting them to stay for a while, you can do that. You can also use it to support your tuition reimbursement benefits. The thing to know is that it's for employees who are at a minimum of 30 hours a week, right? So it's definitely not for part-time employees. And there are some minimums in terms of pay requirements, and that's all detailed on the website. But this is a really exciting program, and it's one that I think the arts and cultural sector cannot afford to sleep on, right? So, Mass Creative has a couple of jobs we have not been able to fill, and we may take a look at this program. Like, don't wait to do this. It's exciting. It also, frankly, is an opportunity for our sector to demonstrate that we are employers, and to continue to build that track record within the larger executive branch, right? About how we are engaging in this work. So this is really exciting, and I heartily urge you to check it out. If you have questions, let me know. We'll see how we can help navigate some of those questions. And as the program continues to move forward, we're going to be looking for success stories. So give us a holler if you apply and you find that it's really successful, because we'd like to share that information out with others. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to highlight here is that there's some pretty exciting data that's been released in the last couple of months, and it's called the Culture and Community in a Time of Transformation Reports. This is a project that was undertaken by Slover Lynette and LaPlaca Cohen, which are two research firms, frankly, focused around arts and culture and audiences. And they did a nationwide study, but they also did a deep dive into Massachusetts, thanks to additional funding by the Barr Foundation. And what's really exciting about this data is it tells a pretty interesting story. First, it says that in Massachusetts, residents, and they surveyed audiences, right, and members are all existing art supporters, but then they also did some surveying of folks who don't necessarily are or aren't necessarily fervent art supporters, right? But they are residents of Massachusetts. So the first thing is that on a higher level than national responses, people in Massachusetts value arts and culture. They see it as a part of their lives. They see it as a place for connection, for joy, for relief, right? And this is in the last 2 years. They participate in personal creative experiences as well as cultural and creative endeavors or events. They did attend virtual programming. They do see that that's something they might want to continue to do, but they are excited about a return to in-person. They also want to see the arts and cultural entities that they care about take larger leading roles in social issues, which I think is really exciting, right? Because I think oftentimes we as a sector are worried about, if we take a lead in a civic engagement space, will that turn off our audiences? And the answer that this research is saying is absolutely not. So those are some of the really interesting findings. There's also findings around what audiences both expect and perceive arts and culture in Massachusetts around being welcoming and inclusive of diverse and minority populations. And so I think that this has the power to help us with our advocacy case making, right? Like this is something residents in Massachusetts and voters in Massachusetts want to see more of, right? And the only way we're going to be able to do that is through increased public investment. It can also help you as an organization, as a leader of an organization, if you're thinking about programmatic development or strategic planning. So the cool thing too is that there are going to be a number of there's a statewide study, but then there were regional specific deep dives. And so all of those regions are going to have regional convenings and further conversation. And so in the chat, you'll see links to the list of all of those. One has already happened in New Bedford. They were quick on the upstep, but you can register to attend as many as you want. I think they're still, some of them are still working on their registration form, but you can plot those dates in your calendar. Again, I think this is really exciting data, and it's an opportunity for us to see what the residents of Massachusetts are asking for and see for the arts and cultural community in Massachusetts, and we should listen to that. Okay, so the other big piece, right? Let's using that last data piece about civic engagement and leading on social issues. Let's talk about the Create the Vote Coalition, right? So we've got a number of pretty intense statewide races happening this year. We have the governor of Massachusetts is open, right? There's not an incumbent running, and nor is there an incumbent running for lieutenant governor. And those are really important races. Having a clear and visible champion for arts and culture in the executive branch of our government in Massachusetts will make a difference. And so we're interested in joining with many others in Massachusetts to build a coalition that is focused on 3 things. How do we continue to build the political power of the arts and cultural sector in Massachusetts? And part and parcel with that is showing up. When you show up and you make yourself visible to candidates and to elected officials, you make it clear that we are large in numbers and we care about similar interests, right? And that they should care about our similar interests. Then we're going to engage candidates, right? And talk with them about specifics about how they can think about leading the Commonwealth towards a stronger, more inclusive and equitable arts and cultural community for all. And then we're going to talk to voters, right? Like not just arts workers and cultural leaders, but also those of you, your audiences and your members and folks who say, yeah, I care about this. This is something that's important, but making sure that they are turning up and self-identifying as arts voters and turning up and going to vote, right? Our approach this year is similar to what we did with the Boston Create the Vote Coalition that we did around the mayoral election this past year. We are going to really focus on shared decision-making and shared leadership, right? Our belief is that many of you hold stronger relationships with your current elected officials and potential elected officials than we do, and that is a good thing. So let's talk about how we can leverage those relationships for a broader and stronger impact, right? We're going to be equity centered, right? So an arts and cultural community that is only reflective of one identity is not that's not the arts and cultural community that we're looking to support. And so we're going to be thinking about ways that we raise up a different future for support for all arts and cultures in Massachusetts. And then we're also looking for opportunities for intersectional advocacy, right? Like, who are our partners? You know, we know that transportation is an arts issue, housing is an arts issue, education is an arts issue. So how can we think about lifting up those issues in our own work, in our own advocacy? So all of this means, the other thing is that we are, when I talk about this shared decision-making and shared leadership, there are opportunities for a variety of levels of engagement, right? If you are all gung-ho on this call and you're like, yeah, sign me up, I want to make every co-decision, we want you to be with us, right? And then if you're like, you know what, my organization can probably hold time or hold space to simply retweet or re-amplify the messaging that you're sharing, and we're happy and committed to doing that with our audiences and with our members, great, we have a space for you within this effort as well. Everyone is welcome, and we will find a space for you. So to help us, we have a little bit of an engagement form that should be in the chat right now. Please fill it out. If you're an individual arts worker, we want you to be part of this conversation. If you're here representing an arts and cultural organization, we want you to be in that space too. So please take a moment to fill that out. We're going to have our first full Create the Vote Coalition meeting on Wednesday, April 6th at 11. We want you to join us, and in order for us to invite you, we need you to fill out that form. So that would be like my big to-do for today, is please fill out that form. That is everything I have for today. We will meet in 2 weeks on April 8th. Thank you for your patience as we sort of negotiated some scheduling conflicts in the last couple of weeks, but we are back, and we are going to be, we're going to be heading into the end of the legislative session, so there will be some pretty consistent updates that we're going to want to share. But right now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just do a quick check-in to see if anyone has any questions. Any questions? Hey, Ruth.
I have a question about Hire Now. There's a sentence in the not very much information that I found yesterday saying that there's a criteria for eligible expenses, but I could not find what that criteria was anywhere. And I wonder if you can help with that.
We can certainly help with that. We'll follow up, Ruth.
Okay, thank you.
I think the examples that they give are sort of trying to outline some of those eligible expenses. They're saying you can use it for compensation. Is that not how you read it?
I guess we're wondering if there can be expenses that don't add additional expenses, like recruitment.
This is being recorded, so I will hold my tongue. Yeah, let me take a look. And see if I can get information.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other questions or any other things folks want to share? We're not the only advocacy game in town. So if there's something that's happening regionally or locally that you want to amplify, let's take like a minute to talk about that. All right. Well, that is all for us. Thank you for joining us this morning. We will be back again, as I said, April 8th, but have lovely weekends. Enjoy the spring, Massachusetts spring. We're glad we're in this together. See ya.